Hold on 1 second. Even though we're live, I just screwed this up. I didn't have my memory card inside my mixer. But yeah. If I use the audio from StreamYard, it's going to sound like shit on my podcast. So sorry about
okay.
Yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties. I got to stick my stick my memory card inside my mixer. This is why I don't like going live all the time.
It's a little nerve-wracking. I get it. Hey, Tom Keeper. Hey, Jay Snyder. Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for being here, guys.
Good. And my mic was muted. Okay. Now we're ready to go. Welcome to the NY Patriot Show. In today's episode, I am very excited to have Dana on. And with me as well, I also got my co-host, Lisa. What is up, Lisa? How are you?
Looking very forward to this.
Yes. This is definitely some very, definitely interesting information. I have Dana on. And I know I just had somebody on about a few weeks ago for the Process Church. And I ended up stumbling across Dana's work, even though I had been following her for a bit on Twitter. I didn't notice her Process Church stuff until after the fact. And I was like, I got to get her on for this. Even though I just had Michelle's Healing Home on, I got to get her on because you're both covering the same topic, but I feel like you're going in different avenues. And I was like, this is great. Just more info, and it's not going to be regurgitated stuff from the last guest. So I was really excited to get you on. Dana, let everybody know what is up with you and Rottingjewels.
So you can find me on Instagram and YouTube, Rottingjewels, and then Twitter is Dana Duda. That's where I'm at.
Oh, that's right. I do follow you on Instagram too. That's right. I think we messaged on Twitter, then I messaged you
Correct.
on Instagram.
Yeah.
Back to Twitter. Awesome. And her links are also in the bottom right now as well. So if anybody wants to go check her stuff out from my side and doesn't know who she is, her links are in there now. Dana, I guess to start it off, first off, what do you basically even cover on your own show? Let people get an idea of like what you do and what your gig is.
Most of my content, I started out on Instagram doing like just, the 90-second clips. And I was starting with all of the coups under Alan Dulles just to help people have a better grasp of American history, right? Because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand the past. That way we can try to do better in the future. But once I covered the Franklin scandal, then that was kind of where everything took off, and I was being asked to come on different shows. And then, there was a very strange experience within the ex-Scientology community, specifically when I was a guest on YouTube, and people speaking very favorably of CIA doctors that are no longer with us, specifically Dr. Jolly West and Dr. Margaret Singer, both of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And I was like, okay, this is red flag city. And so I decided to move onto YouTube. That way I could just do longer form research.
Awesome. Good for you. You're doing pretty well, I think, right? Are you having fun?
Oh, yeah. I love it. I love it.
That's all that matters, right?
About
That's fucking awesome.
I agree.
Good for you. And I think actually what caught my attention with you in the first place was the Franklin scandal work. And I totally forgot that you did that. And that's another idea for the future now, because that's another whole topic that's just a huge spider web. I mean, I think the Occult Rejects did 3 or 4 episodes on it as well. So definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's a big web.
Now, what got you into the Process Church?
Well, so I had seen that documentary, Sympathy for the Devil, right? Very visually appealing, but they just kind of present it as people are LARPing. And I was banned from YouTube for 2 weeks because the ex-Scientology community reported one of my little schizo clips. And while I had my break, I was doing research, and I was like, man, I wonder if L. Ron Hubbard is Michael Aquino's father. And I realized that sounds completely insane coming out of my mouth. But then I started actually researching it, and making your way through that timeline specifically. Eventually, you're going to sort of get to the process, right? Because I have to move through that whole era. And once I got to the process, I'm like, nobody's ever asked these people to show proof of anything, which is completely crazy to me because Timothy Wiley's story is really just kind of not realistic if these people are not intelligence or they're not elitist, right? And so I've pretty much just been trying to either verify or, debunk, which I think that I'm showing that a lot of it is a lie and a lot of it has been misrepresented, especially that court case in the UK over Ed Sanders' book, because I am of the firm opinion that Ed Sanders deserves a huge apology before he passes away because he's still alive. So.
When you said, "Oh, this may sound silly or whatever," but in my honest opinion, all these people that are involved in this stuff, L. Ron Hubbard, it's obvious Aquino. I mean, you don't have to hide that, but they're all occultists, in my opinion. Parsons was an occultist, So, in my opinion, if these people are occultists, anything's possible with who screwed who to try to birth some baby for whatever reason. You never know. So, as that may sound wild to some people, I would not, I wouldn't knock ideas like that around. I do think
Well,
there is moonchilds out there because people, try to birth babies at certain times. For all you know, that's exactly what that could have been. Who knows? I'm just saying.
yeah.
When it comes to occultism, the things that sound silly may not actually be so silly to other people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I reading the Babylon Working, when you read Jack Parsons' writings and Liber 49, it's pretty well established even in the ex-Scientology community from ex-Scientology authors that, Hubbard was the one who was, writing everything down. He was there. And that starts in early January of that year. So that leaves room for that to be, a normal birthing schedule, so to speak. And quite frankly, who's to say that it was Marjorie Cameron, man? Who's to say? Because there's multiple people being interviewed. I think they were in Pasadena at the time, and they're like, yeah, they had lots of women there, lots of women. Doors were closed. There weren't people with eyes on them 24/7. So I don't really think that it's out of the realm of possibility. Plus, there's just a lot of similarities with like Scientology and what the Temple of Set ended up becoming specifically as far as like a grift financially, in my opinion. Because like the Temple of Set, like you can literally just like buy your way through the hierarchy now. So kind
Oh,
of
I
like
mean,
Scientology.
to be totally honest with you, I mean, I don't, again, I don't know how many people may be total members and how many people stop going and keep giving money, because I do know that happens. That even happened to me for a while. But like when I was in the OTO, I mean, you got a fuck ton of people that are donating, not donating, lodge dues. You have some people who aren't even going anymore that are still paying. It's just like, to think about it. I mean, it can be a grift. I do think, for sure. Just starting a secret society just to make money and maybe to dumb people down. I'm sure it has happened, purposely. But
Absolutely.
definitely, I never really thought of it as a grift, but I definitely think it can be. That's a good point.
I
Yeah.
think it's the and also obviously with Aquino, because everybody knows his story, right? He doesn't necessarily have to be intelligence, but his intelligence ties are very blatant as far as what he was allowed to get away with. And L. Ron Hubbard was intelligence too, and I did an episode, kind of looking into the death of Jack Parsons because, I mean, whether it was Frank Molina, whether it was Hubbard, whether Anton LaVey was involved, there were a lot of people that could have benefited from Jack Parsons' death. So I think that he was, basically a moving target. But, Hubbard being intelligence and Aquino having his intelligence ties, that's just another similarity to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in one of your videos you said it best that most of these cults are basically intelligence ops, and you just see it over and over and over again. Yeah.
That's how I feel. Yes, absolutely. I feel like all of these cults are literally intelligence operations, and I think The reason why it makes me so angry is because some of these cults obviously get the sort of religious status, right? And people do believe in these things. And for some people, I say normal person very loosely, but the person who goes and that's what they believe in and they're not hurting anybody, like how jarring is that? You know what I'm saying? Like that your faith, whatever you believe in, if you find out that it's an intelligence operation, I think that's going to make people pretty mad if they find out. And I think that that's a great reason to do away with the intelligence community, quite frankly. So that is personally my goal, is to attempt to document the best that I can that these cults are an intelligence operation and get it out into the public eye, because I think that people should know, because it's insulting, quite frankly.
I've said that before, that I do question, even with the OTO, I'll admit it, I was in it. I mean, they got me, but I do question if that was, a three-letter agency. I have wondered if the inception of that was a three-letter agency and we were just handed, pictures and stories and names. I mean, I have no idea. I definitely think there are ones out there that were started and are psyops by three-letter agencies.
A lot of this comes primarily from British intelligence. So, Aleister Crowley was, British intelligence. Um, Obviously, people taking little bits and pieces and kind of running away with their parts of it, right? And then making a different cult and a different cult. But I mean, it's another form of control, right? Like it's behavior modification and group control. And specifically with the process, what I notice, because I found two companies that preceded the pre-process that everybody knows. So it was the process church, but before that, for a little while, it was compulsions analysis, right? And that's what people know. However, in that stack of 400 pages of court records, there were two companies before that. One of them was a financial company. I'm pretty sure that it was set up in an like an offshore shell account in Africa specifically. I'm still trying to figure out the details on that. But what you'll notice is it's literally Scientology and Tavistock, because one of the individuals that was he says that he was doing an experiment in Scientology, and then he was doing an experiment in the process. He says in a couple of different places, one, that compulsions analysis experienced an implosion when they implemented group therapy. Well, where did group therapy come from? It came from Tavistock, right? And then in another paper, he specifically says that the process is basically religious engineering. Well, what does Tavistock do? Social engineering, right? So that's it's just them cherry picking different things and using it to manipulate people, in my opinion.
Yeah, I I agree with that, with the secret societies. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's just from my experience in the OTO, I just felt like it was actually like glorifying or kind of handing you the handcuffs that stop you from experiencing magic. It wasn't really the visual, or it's I don't know. It's just hard to explain. It just for me, as a magician who is trying to have an experience with God, once I think I started having those, I just realized that place does not envision, in no way does it show anything about the direction I'm going in. To me, it seemed to highlight things that when doing work on yourself, you'd realize that's the problem to begin with. So why is
Sure.
it glorified and highlighted? Why are you glorifying the demons that have me chained to these realms? It's very weird. And it makes no sense to me. So I would think there's something behind that, and there's a reason for that. Even like you had mentioned before about possibly, Aquino. I know we're going to get to the process church eventually, but when you were talking about Aquino before, I mean, could he have just have learned from Anton LaVey and it was like, I'm going to go make mine now? I mean, because even to me, Anton LaVey with the Church of Satan, it was very much like cosplay. I'm sure there was legit occultism and magic somewhere in there by someone. But to the way I think it appealed to the public and raked in the people and raked in the money and got the popularity was through aesthetics, cosplay, selling it, dramatization of atheism. It just, to me, I think he knew how to sell it. And then that would question, did Michael Aquino catch on to that and watch and learn and realize and did his own after? You know?
So, in my opinion, so Anton LaVey, his wife, when he passed, she wrote the authorized sort of autobiography about him. And I do kind of have to be delicate about this. However, in regards to specifically the Church of, Satan, his ties. So his uncle had ties to Al Capone, I believe. He was in jail with Al Capone, so that was sort of like underworld ties. And then Anton himself apparently had a lot of ties with the Haganah and other extremist groups from that area. So that sort of gives the intelligence twist. As far as like you're talking about, like the visual, the cosplay, because I make fun of those pictures where it literally looks like he's wearing like a devil onesie from Amazon. I'm like, dude, this is so ghetto. But, it's interesting when you look back in all of those publications because nobody fact checked him, right? Like nobody verified, did you really work here? Were you really here? And it's like, no, he was, I think, like playing on an organ in some bar, right? And he was making like $30 a week, whatever. Um, but he was able to sell it because he was charismatic and people didn't question. It was new, it was exciting, and beautiful women flock to him, and that attracts other people and they want to know. As far as Aquino, as far as I understand it, I think that he joined while he was in Vietnam. So, I mean, what are you doing running being a part of the Phoenix program, specifically Operation Wandering Soul? Why are you worried about joining the Church of Satan while you're doing all that? I think that that's super suspicious. I think that Aquino was way more serious than Anton LaVey, in
Oh,
my opinion. I think that Aquino did believe in that. Because I mean, the stuff that he did at Wavelsburg, Himmler's Hall of the Dead, doing black magic spells with the Joint Chiefs of Staff while they were trying to expand NATO, that's all super suspicious to me. So,
real quick, I just want to ask you, because you've done your research with Aquino, have you ever found a tie with him and Edward Lansdale at all? Or ever come
no,
across that name? Sound familiar at all? Okay.
but I
'Cause he
can.
was I don't know if you know who he is, but he was kind of, I think he was like the Aquino before Aquino. Like he was the person who had like helicopters over in I think the Philippines, shouting stuff out of loudspeakers, and people on the ground think it's fucking ghosts telling them that if you keep, harboring these communists, you're gonna fucking die and be in hell. Like it was a total mental psyop. They
Yeah,
have people hanging in the woods thinking that vampires killed them. Like they were mind fucking the people over there. And it was Edward Lansdale, but like he's like right prior to kind of Aquino. And I
that's
wonder if there's
fascinating.
there has to be, I guarantee there's a connection between the two somewhere.
I believe you. I would agree just hearing
He
that.
was
Yeah,
heavy
absolutely.
to like, he was good. Just put it that way, I guess. As fucked up as it is to say that, he was good at what he did.
It's
You
their
know?
job, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. All right. Sorry to keep on going. I mean, there's just so many things. I mean, you talk about Aquino and then Temple of Set, Anton LaVey, all these things would keep going on. Let's try to maybe get back to, I guess, the Process Church in Hubbard. I mean, you can bring up Aquino too because it's involved, but maybe get back to that.
Okay. All right. So specifically, I started with Timothy Wiley, right? Because I feel like he's sort of the face. I bought a physical copy of Love, Sex, Fear, and Death because I was, I need to be able to write in it. That's kind of helpful. When
Right.
you look him up in the papers, for the most part, you're only going to find stuff from later on in his life where he's really into trying to talk to dolphins and guardian angels, which is extremely bizarre. So I here could not find his mother's name. So then I find out that he wrote two autobiographies and he talks in the third person. In like German, he calls himself mein Host, and it's just extremely obnoxious. But he gives his mother's name. So I was able to find his mother, and her surname was Diana Wiley. Now, his father is George Haswell. She specifically was working for intelligence, so he did not lie about that. I was actually able to find those records. She worked for the Department of Economic Warfare. She was the secretary, so that checks out. Why you cannot find him in any of the records worldwide is because he was lying about his last name when he was born. His last name was his father's last name. So his real name is Timothy Haswell, not Timothy Wiley. And then obviously from there, I said, okay, I have to fact check every single person. And specifically, you know, all of his stories about, being in specifically, because this was the major red flag to me, him hanging out with William S. Burroughs in Tangier in the late 50s. So with Timothy Wiley's age, that's going to put him late teens. Well, L. Ron Hubbard was also in Tangier around that time with William S. Burroughs specifically. So that's pretty bizarre to me.
Yeah.
That's that's not a coincidence.
And if you think about it, too, I mean, that probably makes that much of a difference, but like traveling then probably wasn't like as we do now. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? So like for two
Yeah, it's a
people to
bigger
be like in
deal.
the same area, kind of
Yeah,
like
it's
that,
a
it's like,
way bigger deal.
yeah, it's
yeah,
it's like, come on.
yeah.
Now
It's
I could be in another country and run into somebody that I know from New York, on vacation. But like it's just back then, I don't think that was like happening.
and not in a place like Tangier where
Yeah.
like there's just a lot of really crazy things going on. And specifically, oh, what's his name? Hold on, I want to look it up because so when I was tracking his mom, she created, do you guys remember in school when they would pull up like the little light projector thing and they would put like the piece of paper and it had the slip cover over it and they would light it up? His mom like
Transparency.
invented those.
Oh, wow.
So Timothy Wiley's mom invented those. That was kind of like her claim to fame, right?
Dang.
So who is that?
That's interesting.
Ian Summer.
I'm actually covering some, like, me and Lisa were going to cover gematria and numerology, and there was somebody who was big into gematria and numbers, Athanasius Kircher, and I was going to toss him into like kind of like the series, and I think back in whenever he was from 1600s, some shit, maybe a little bit later, he had like an idea already of like saying like how to make projecting and magnetism with clocks and stuff. But it's
Oh wow.
interesting how he had like an idea of being able to project stuff, and then
Yeah.
like this lady who's involved with who knows what has that. It just seems like that idea was already birthed from an occultist.
Yeah,
I find that.
absolutely. It is. There's just like all these little strange ties. William S. Burroughs, his boyfriend, is he made the dream machine, right? So it's just tie after tie of like certain technologies, right? Um, and
Almost as if like
with
occultists take other old occultist theories and actually take the science that they have now and the technology and actually try to make it reality or prove it.
yeah,
Sometimes I wonder if it's like that in a sense.
I think so. I think that even I can't say, if I'm being honest, I can't say like, oh, like this is just an intelligence operation because I believe that some of these people do believe in these things, right? And they're just using that intelligence tie to their benefit and they are going to do their bidding. However, they also believe in it, right? And I think that that's part of why some of the cults become so big is because they are legit recruiting, right? Because they're like, oh no, like we can get this done because I have a black budget. There's, it's a blank check 24/7.
Oh, you give a
And it's
good magician a blank check, he'll he can make wonders work for you.
yeah, absolutely.
You just got
And
to
it's
make it real
interesting.
symmetrical.
If Timothy Wiley was in Tangier at that time, at that age, I mean, L. Ron Hubbard was being groomed for intelligence since he was 12. So, I mean, that goes back to when he was a preteen. So, Timothy Wiley being in a really obscure sort of dangerous place, I would say, for someone that age. I don't know what the age laws were back then. It seems like him and Hubbard sort of have a parallel with each other. The de Grimstons, as far as Marianne McLean, Marianne de Grimston, she was never engaged to Sugar Ray Robinson. I also could not tie her whatsoever to the Perfumo affair. I have not found anything that checks out with that. I think that that was, like a disinformation campaign to kind of throw people off
Really?
of the scent. Um, I have nailed down who her mother is down to two women. I do think that she did not know her father. I think that that is accurate. Um, and then her and Robert, specifically Robert de Grimston, it's really bizarre. every story that you read, whether it's online or here, as far as like the narrative, is that when they got married, Mary Ann convinced him to change his name, right? Like that's what everybody says. And I think that that is them seeding the idea that she's sort of like this megalomaniac. She's the one that's in control. That is completely false because I have found public records where he specifically changed his name while he was still living with his father in this really weird aisle in Kensington, somewhere in London, which apparently is one of the wealthiest places in the entire world, and only royalty is allowed to live there.
Oh wow.
But only he changed his name to de Grimston before he was ever married to her. So I'm getting major like black nobility vibes. It's super sus, but their whole story is that part's not true at all.
Uh,
To go back on Timothy Wiley really quickly, it was his interest in the whole dolphin thing that sold it for me in terms of intelligence, because military has been heavily researching dolphins in their intelligence branch since the 60s. I mean, they even had dolphins scanning Vietnam for ordnance back in the
yeah,
day.
yeah,
So,
back in the day in MK Ultra, they were giving a dolphin acid and jerking it the fuck off.
right, right, right.
I mean, you know,
Well, John C. Lilly, the guy who ran that experiment in MK Ultra, in one of Timothy Wiley's autobiographies, he talks about how they're friends. So I that's a tie. That's straight up like they were friends.
Exactly.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
so that's why you want to talk to dolphins, right?"
there's something up with dolphins though.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the thing that I find interesting with them, because I had somebody on a gematria dude come on, and this is what actually piqued my interest with dolphins. They do kind of have like three parts of a brain. We only have two. They have three, and then like if you want to think of like circle wise, or you want to start getting into numbers instead of a 360, maybe now it's 720, stuff like that. It's very interesting. And then when you start getting into video, we have 720p. Just weird when you start seeing numbers and things with the dolphins in their brains.
Yeah. No, I always see those memes like symbolism will be their downfall, right? Like that's how you can kind of suss people out. So I do think that people should keep that kind of stuff in mind because I mean, exactly, the dolphin thing is a red flag. And I didn't necessarily really think about it because I was really trying to figure out who everybody was, but it was one of my subscribers and they were like, you remember that MK Ultra doctor that was trying to talk to dolphins? And I'm like, well, let me look. And there you go. Timothy Wiley's giving him a shout out. Um, I mean, all of these people, they're so far everybody that I can tell, they're all intelligence. And those, what's wrong?
I'm sorry, I had to show that one. I
That's
didn't
okay.
disturb you.
It's hilarious. No, that's fine. It's
Unfortunately for the
funny.
dolphin, the acid didn't work. That was
That's
one thing that they
awesome.
realized, that
Yeah.
acid does not work on dolphins. So
Yeah.
he didn't
Yeah.
get high at
That
least.
sounds like a horror story. Um, The other interesting thing that was sort of like a red flag for me is in Timothy Wiley's timeline, he mentions it really passively about how Robert's younger brother is technically the first one to get Dianetic therapy and never names Robert's younger brother. I have figured out who he is. His name is Andrew Moore. And these people change their church names like a million times. I can't find a photo of him yet, but I do know who he is. So he is technically the first person that ever got Dianetic therapy out of everybody. So I think that there's something up with that kid. But still, like Robert de Grimston was the only one that changed his last name. And, Day Grimston, that's a bloodline name, right? So why was he the only one that changed it that way? Um, and Timothy Wiley talks about how Robert de Grimston was born in China. I did find that ship manifest of Robert Moore as a baby, as an infant being brought over with his parents coming
Oh, that
from
is
Shanghai.
amazing.
So I
That is
I was
amazing.
like I almost like threw my laptop. I was so excited because I had been hunting it down for weeks and I was like, "Oh my god, I found him." So that is pretty much the only part of his story that checks out at all.
My so you've been like checking like receipts, like I know I did it when I covered like Mormonism. You can actually check like boat things of like people coming
Oh
over.
yeah. Mhm.
That's
I'm
awesome.
checking everything.
Have you tried? It was something I put my boy Thrash on, and he ended up. This is actually to me, it's impressive. There's only one picture. If you go and look up who Sidney Gottlieb is, I think there's only one picture that anybody has even ever showed of him. And I think even if there's some guy who wrote a book about him, and he even said that I think he went to the CIA and like asked to get this one photo. That's the only photo that's constantly used. My man Thrash actually found another photo of him doing this whole fucking thing with following people and going through research papers and stuff. And so I'm actually kind of, I was like, it blew me away. I was like, holy shit, there's actually like another photo of Sidney Gottlieb, and I've never seen anybody ever use it before. Not that it matters, but like going through birth records, and I've even noticed, I don't know if you've tried this before, death stuff, like
Yeah.
gravestone. If you go to gravestone sites, and they have an obituary, that's normally the best way to actually find out who their relatives are, because they'll mention who they were married to and who they like in their kids. And I found a lot of stuff out just legit going on gravestone sites and finding out, like, because it'll even sometimes, like, you can see like someone from the Eastern Star donated flowers. It's like, okay, I mean, there's a tie to masonry right there. Or somebody's tombstone I've showed before will have Mason symbolism on it. Masonic compass and square. So those things, you can find some really interesting shit. If I just don't think people think about checking stuff like that. Looking
Yeah,
up
I've had to use
gravestones, obituaries.
Yeah, no, the gravestone, seriously, I found it's brother Caleb, technically. He has the most suspicious obituary that I've ever seen on the internet ever. There's a lot of people making weird references to obscure books like from this time period in memory of him. And then the one doctor, the one psychiatrist that the process uses when they're talking about like the gray zone, and he's in a little circle and it says, "This psychiatrist agrees with us." Like he's, the ward over the gray zone. I was able to track him down by his tombstone specifically because that guy was involved in a massive financial scandal in Africa. So I'm suspicious that he was helping them set up offshore accounts, possibly, but that's going to take me a long time to figure out.
That's Africa. Something's up with Africa too, I think.
There usually is. L. Ron Hubbard was also in Liberia doing very sort of spooky things with spooky money with a black budget, right? Moving stuff around in different shell corporations. So there's just a lot of really weird stuff going on. And I don't know. I just like this book made me so angry. I'm not going to lie, because this is the updated edition that has selected transcripts from the court records. And I'm like, let me see what you selected, because my audience has seen almost all 400 pages. And of
Yeah, yeah.
course, it's it's them painting it as a witch hunt, right? Kind of like Aquino did. That's a huge similarity that I see, because that is a misrepresentation of those court records completely.
That is something I want to mention that I thought was actually rather impressive. You took the time to go through a ton of that on your channel. If people actually want to see the court documents, I mean, you went through a lot of them. So
There
that's a
was there's a lot of crazy stuff in there, man. I mean, literally the Vatican was assisting them. That's on record. They don't mention that in the book. I haven't read that anywhere else, where you have this priest who, while he was at the Vatican, is like, "I would put their sex issue on the porch of my church and sell it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it." And they're like, "Okay." And he's like, "I was helping them clean up their image." Yeah. Okay, that's not suspicious at all. And while he's in Rome doing his training, they're also in Rome at the same time. So it's like, what were you guys doing? But that was how I was able to figure out that compulsions analysis was not the start. Nobody gives a date to when these people got together. Uh, Thanks to those court records and Ed Sanders' book, that chapter about the process that was removed here, that's how I was able to figure out that Robert and Mary were together a little bit earlier than what anybody else says, and that Robert changed his last name to de Grimston before he met her. So there is a lot of fruit in there. There's a lot of truth, but there is also a lot of complete nonsense, because it's, well, we believe in everything and we're not doing anything wrong. There's nothing suspicious. It's all good. And they're like, you need to clarify, right? You need to clarify these things. And that's pretty much all they talk about in here is just their theology. So,
Do you think, not to like jump ahead, but do you think this stuff is still going on with like the process church and everything?
oh hell yeah, it is. Absolutely. So, one of the guys, William Sims Bainbridge, he is the biggest sus lord that I've ever encountered. He works for the US government. I can't even remember what department it is. It's super obscure, but he's really into cybernetics and I'm just like, "No, thank you." But he's the one who did the research experiment with Scientology and then the process, and he's written books about the revival of the process church. So he wrote this paper basically breaking down the process's transmutation, as he calls it. And what he says specifically, besides the religious engineering, he says moving forward into animal advocacy is the natural conclusion. It is not a conversion. That was just the next step. Because that really was rooted in Mary Ann McLean's sort of theology as far as animal abuse being the greatest sin, period. And humanity needs to be destroyed so that God can be restored. And animals are the only creatures that are pure on the earth. And specifically, where Best Friends Animal Society is, aka the Process Church of the Final Judgment, the land that they own in Utah is where people have been hunting for Montezuma's gold. So now they have access to that land by themselves, and no one's allowed on that property.
That's not suspicious at all.
How convenient.
No, no, it's not. No, it's not.
I have somebody asking, I'll put it up on the screen, and I hate to put you on the spot if you happen to know of this. Ask her about the Indigo Gallery links to Process Church in London where John met Yoko, apparently. Have you heard
I
anything
can
about
look into it. I'm happy to
Oh,
look
okay.
into it.
Wondering if you happen to know about it now. So
I haven't looked into, but I mean, I absolutely will, because now that I'm kind of, and I'm not trying to divert from their question because I haven't heard of it, but I'm going to look into it. But looking sort of reevaluating Ed Sanders' chapter and sort of having to make my way back through the culture, right? As far as like Manson and all of that stuff. Uh, I know that I'm going to have to go back to the culture, so to speak, in London as well. Because the school that they all met at, the architecture school, Regent Polytechnic, Pink Floyd was there at the same time. So they were all going to this very
Right.
cush sort of elitist architecture school at the same time, obviously
You
on
know,
very different missions.
I did think that was interesting, though. If I remember correctly, didn't one or two of the guys from Pink Floyd meet in architecture school?
Yeah,
I was always just like, just when it comes to occultism and like I do think I love Floyd. They're one of my favorite bands, but I do think
sure.
they're musicians. They're occultists. It is what it is. And it's just like, I mean, architecture, I'm just like, oh, come on, like an architect. Like Rex Heuermann, another thing that I think is a totally occult and symbolic case. He was an architect as well. Like, it's just like,
It
what's
is
up with
very,
Rex?
yeah, I agree. It is very, very weird because there was a magazine that they all worked on together at that school called Polygon, but it's like $700 for one copy online. So I can't find it, but that would show when they all met specifically, because this timeline that they give, I think that they are sending people on a rabbit trail for a reason, so people don't know where they were at or what they were doing. Um, and that's why I think that I'm going to be here for a very long time, specifically because I am walking back into Ed Sanders specifically with his chapter about the process. I am evaluating everything, saying in my mind he's right, but what was missing? And I'm going to do the same. I know that there's problems with Terry Morey's research. However, I'm going to do the exact same thing with the Son of Sam because there's just too many things. There's too many things
Oh,
that stick
yeah.
out to me specifically.
Yeah, I'll have to hit you up when you're done with that. Because the Son of Sam, I think there is so much that is just not known about that case at all.
Well, there's a lot of Scientology ties, right? Like that's really weird. I feel like that's the big thing that people kind of don't take seriously. Because, in my opinion, I think that little girl boss, Leah Remini, has done a great job of running a sort of disinformation campaign by going, oh my God, this is a kooky cult and they're going to take your money and they're going to sort of separate your family. But I'm out here and I'm being super tough, right? I'm fighting this really rich cult. No, you guys are being disingenuous about everything. And so people just blow off Scientology like it is sort of a kooky cult. L. Ron Hubbard has direct intelligence ties, specifically being groomed by British intelligence since his youth. And there are just a lot of Scientology ties in some of these major crimes around that time. And I think that that is, in my opinion, I think that that is an area that needs to be explored with a very fine tooth comb.
Yeah, I think Son of Sam and Zodiac Killers has a lot more. The Zodiac Killer has a lot more behind them when it comes to like. I think there's multiple people involved. I think it was so much like almost like a. I would say like put it this way. Sometimes I think like let's say we'll take like the OTO or even Freemasonry. You might have some people on there that might have the same mindset, so they kind of make their own little offshoot thing. That's kind of like their own little type of cult. And I do think sometimes we'll get shit like that that might end up bringing about the Zodiac Killer or the Son of Sam. I think that's a possibility, and I do think there's just a lot behind those two serial killers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not as cut and dry as it is. That was some serious deep workings. I think both of those.
I think, if you when I step back and kind of look at the bigger picture, it was a perfect time for Jolly West to sort of solidify his name in American history by seeding that notion of the lone wolf, into everybody's minds. Like, oh no, it's not a cult. That's way too crazy. It's just one person accomplishing these really crazy, sort of detailed, but no, it's totally random, right? Even though there's so many similarities and there's dogs being sacrificed, in different places in the country, right? And even though these people worship dogs and also sacrifice them, oh, and then the Manson girls were also getting canine diseases from doing certain things with dogs, but people don't seem to want to talk about that because it's an Ed Sanders book, right? So there's just too many things that are similar, but that helped Jolly West, that was his claim to fame, is the lone wolf. Whether it's Jack Ruby, Timothy McVeigh, I mean, pick one. Seriously. I mean, that man was a criminal and a monster, but specifically within the ex-Scientology community, he is hailed as a hero. So.
Very well said.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, please.
You had covered, and I haven't gone into the video, so that's why I'm asking, predictive biotech. That they are out of Utah, and are they associated with any of the, I'm assuming some of the claims are legit in that they are selling stem cells, but they're not stem cells. Are they affiliated any sort of way with all of this?
With the process?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, they sure are, because I've located at least one of the process's shell corporations. So it's basically like it's a shell corp, but it's like a representative. And literally, when I was looking at it, I see who it's linked to, and that was the thing that was at the top was predictive biotech. And I'm like, well, what the fresh hell is this? That's a red flag. And so I click it, and I'm like, okay, so what the hell are they doing? Right? Like, what are they doing? Because specifically, Best Friends Animal Society, they've had so many lawsuits. They took Michael Vick's dogs. They get all of these contracts with these counties to take all of the dogs. They're going to take everything, right? But then they're trying to rehome dogs that can't be rehomed. And you see pictures of kids, little kids, and old people, other dogs, just horrifically mauled, horrifically. And somehow they get their way out of it. They buy their way out of it every single time. But those dogs most likely have to be put down, right? And if you look at pictures of their cemetery out there on their property, I don't know. I don't like it. It gives me really spooky vibes. I think that they're doing something very bizarre, and they have to have stuff to experiment with, right? If they're in bed with predictive biotech, because they don't just have dogs, they have a lot of rabbits, horses. I think they have some monkeys. I'm not quite sure. I read one article from 2004 where at the time I think they had monkeys. So yeah, there's a lot of suspicious stuff with predictive biotech.
And correct me if I'm wrong, they collect like umbilical cord, Wharton's jelly, amniotic fluid, and they collect all of this and then spin it down, isolate it, purify it, and then turn around and sell it for like PRP or stem cell or any kind of like therapeutic stuff. They sell it. And then I believe some of the lawsuits were that they were actually selling dead cells and not actual live stem cells. So, I mean, that was what I remember them being in the news about, or not them specifically, but companies such as that. And when you mentioned predictive biotech, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to go through this because of that whole blip in the news.
That's what I got from it too. I mean, I'm certainly not a scientist, you know what I mean? But that was what I gathered from it. And I mean, there are lawsuits still now when you look them up. There's still stuff that's popping up, you know, where they're being taken back to court. And someone had posited a theory with me, and I thought it was interesting to consider if you want to be a little bit conspiratorial about it. It would kind of make sense if you have this weird cult that, you know, worships and sacrifices animals, but it's also a sex cult, right? And you're not using protection because then, well, you can get what you need at various stages, right? For this, and that's cheap. Yeah, that's cutting
Or
down on
animals.
cost.
And not only that, because they had the whole testing of animals, that they would impregnate these animals and then collect amniotic, umbilical, or Wharton's jelly from these animals. And who's going to run it through a lab and say, oh no, this is dog PRP, we're not using this, you know what I mean? So, and PRP is plasma rich platelets, and it's used like if you have arthritis or any kind of something, instead of like surgery, you could inject yourself with, or through a doctor, plasma rich platelets, and so that it would plasma, I'm sorry, and it would help with the arthritis, or it would heal the area. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, and it kind of works, and it's less expensive than stem cells. So
Right. And you
yeah.
also can use it for cosmetic purposes like the
Yes.
vampire facials, you know, like the
Correct.
Kim Kardashian
Yes.
facial.
Yes. It's like
So it's very lucrative.
yes. Yes. That's
You know,
that's one.
she's gonna be in the next American Horror Story.
Who?
Kim Kardashian.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, it's about some chick who I think gets knocked up from a spider.
Every
It's
day we stray further. That show used to be great. That first season was amazing. And it's just kind of been downhill from there.
you know what though? I will say only, and it's only due to Lisa actually, and because I grew up on Long Island. Their last series, I actually thought conspiratorial wise and coming down to like weird stuff that was going on with on Long Island with like animal experiments and Nazis fucking around with ticks. I really do wonder what they were showing in that last series
Was
because there
that
was a lot
the
of
one where
stuff
they
that
did the stories?
yeah, and they had like
Oh yeah,
they
I
were
like
like
that.
showing like Fire Island, which like you know if you didn't grow up in New York, I don't know if you would know that Fire Island, Cherry Grove, and the Pines were like that was like the gays that they had that was theirs. Cherry Grove was the party area, the Pines was like the snobby rich gay people. That's where they went, but that was like their area, Fire Island, and it was like known, you know, nobody was bitching about it. It was just you know that's how it was. And that was where all of a sudden Lyme, you know, they're thinking Lyme's popped up. And then like it almost kind of had the same characteristic as HIV. So when HIV started, you know, swooping around, oh no, that's just Lyme's. Or maybe you just got bit by a tick. So now you don't do nothing about it. And just, you know, things start just progressing. But like they were kind of showing that. And, you know, and after having Lisa hit me up and telling me about how Lyme shouldn't have really have ended up the way it was and it shouldn't have jumped the way it did, and then finding out that there was Nazi scientists on Long Island pre and after World War II. I'm like, yo, what the hell was that show actually showing us and telling us?
I haven't seen the second
Some
season,
weird
man. I'm
shit,
gonna
right?
have to watch that.
Yeah. If you know, that's the whole thing. I think like that really wouldn't catch people's attention unless you grew up here and knew specific things and knew about Lyme disease. I think all that shit would go over your head, most people's head, and not catch it and just be like, oh, this is some boring dumb shit. Where it's like this is actually all conspiratorial stuff for Long Islanders, believe it or not.
Anytime there's Nazis, I'm looking it up specifically because I'm like, you guys were doing everything. So I want to know if this is true or not, or if there's a bit of truth in it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we got Fire Pixie saying everybody knew about Fire Island. Well, maybe they did. I don't know. But I knew from Long Island growing up
I
out there.
didn't.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
just
I
knew
Yeah,
that.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I did not. Never heard of that. That's
It was the
crazy.
funny thing is that if you really wanted to go out there and party, you still went to Cherry Grove anyway, even though it was the gay section, because they had bars all over the place, outside bars. The music was hopping, like clubs and shit. People went there anyway, even if they were straight, because it was the fucking party was insane. So yeah, it was good old times back in the day. No, just kidding. All right, so go ahead. Sorry, it got totally thrown off with American Horror Story.
Nope, that's okay. I don't even remember where I left off. I'm
Yeah,
trying to.
totally fucked that up.
No, you're fine. Oh, about best friends specifically. So I'm working on sort of creating, I just learned what they're called, the mind maps that you see where it's like the center and then the little branch and the branch and it all branches out. I am working on showing specifically, the comparison of the original process church and then its iteration now, because there is a lot of nepotism, specifically like Mother Hathor was still working there last year and she just died.
Mother
It's
Hathor.
Yeah, it's all of their children and some of the original founding members. And then they also have a church in New York, the Foundation Faith of God. That one was not put under the umbrella of Best Friends Animal Society. That is still a literal physical church. Um, and then, like I said, I mean, I've found one shell corporation specifically, but I know that they have more. I just have to dig in a bit deeper. Um, and I am waiting right now. I should have an answer this week. But apparently Robert de Grimston's diary's out there and someone's trying to get it for me. Now I don't know if that man was, laying in bed being honest when he's writing in his journal, but I'm hoping that there's just something in there that is a nugget of truth, especially about his brother. Because as I've gone through it, it's different people that all of a sudden become my focus. And that's good because I know that I'm researching and so things are changing and I'm not hung up on one idea. But the DePyers, those brothers are really weird. There's just a lot of familial stuff going on. Um, and I don't know if you guys know the story where I think it was when they were in Stuhl in Mexico and they were like beating themselves with ropes, like in a hut somewhere, right? So,
Who's back to
and
Mexico with weird?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow these weirdos always end up in Mexico for some reason.
well, yeah, and
It's-
they're painted as like the splinter group, and I'm like, they wanted to buy an island in the Bahamas, and then they go to Mexico. Like, they're not a splinter group; they have money.
Right.
It's likely a black budget, but I think that these people were, the elite or like the wealthy. Um, but in all the newspapers, when you hear about that stuff, they say that there's 3 kids that were picked up by the solicitor from Britain, but they only give 2 names. One of those people was one of the founding members' younger brothers, and you will not find that anywhere. It's in those stupid court records, though. And then the 2 girls, they interview them in court, and both of their fathers were like in World War II. One of them specifically had one of the first known UFO sort of UFO near death experiences, and apparently he had a lot of them. I think that that's really bizarre. Um, and then they just kind of move on and act like that stuff's not relevant. It's every single person, even the people that leave, have these really weird ties, specifically either with military, intelligence, medicine, MK stuff. So I'm literally, I feel like I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, trying to break this all down. But it's fine. It's fine.
I love how you seem to like go through a lot of businesses too, right? I think
Oh, yeah.
you like use the whole Bizopedia and you use that site and stuff. Have you ever heard of GuideStar?
I see it in my head, so I know that I have.
GuideStar is a good site if any of these things, almost all of them always do for tax breaks, they will claim some sort of religious tax exemption.
Oh yeah.
And you have to prove, you have to show that. You have to show that legally. You actually have to like show that to the public. So GuideStar is a site that you can go onto and will show you all those things. So sometimes you can find addresses and people's names attached to certain things because they're making this tax exempt shit. So
Yeah, I
that was
tried
like
that.
a little thing to just tell you. Figured.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I tried that. And actually once I discovered that compulsions analysis was not the original process, I went through all of the incorporated, insolvent nonprofit in the UK, and here to try and find the other companies. They don't exist anywhere. So I have all of their tax records from every single organization. Because, like I said, all the different names, not all of them were, put under the umbrella of best friends. But obviously, these people are super evasive on their tax records, so it's not really
Well,
showing much. Those court records have so much.
I think you've shown tax records on your own show, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Not too much with this specifically. I think I've shown tax records for the Aftermath Foundation, for the ex-Scientology community, because I think, in my opinion, that the ex-Scientology community is just the process church of the final judgment, and I think that Leah Remini is their mascot. But that's just my opinion.
The only reason I was even asking about the whole Bizopedia stuff is that, like, I've when using that, I've come across some like really weird ties sometimes with like following secret societies or like cults and stuff. It's just like you're like, why do you have like 10 companies registered to like the same apartment in an apartment complex? It's just like what's
Right.
going on here? I've even and I guess why I was even what made me think about it is that you're talking about this pet company or whatever, the best friends, I forgot the name of it, sorry. But like when I was covering the Fellowship of Friends, I mean that's another cult. It's a little bit different. They got wine company. They have like almost their own division in Google, which is worrisome in itself. But you start like checking all these names and stuff that are associated with these companies, and I had noticed that like where they had it was either the cult was here and the winery was down here, or it was reversed. But like on the map, you could see that they were like directly across from each other, and there was one single, like, you would take that one road, come down, and then take another road. Real easy way to get there. And I was just looking at it on the map, and I was like, well, that's convenient. And I don't know what made me think about it, but like on the map, there was like this little pin to show like there was this deli in between both of them. And I was like, just for shits and giggles, I'm going to run this deli through Bizopedia. And the fucking name on there matched one of the fucking doctors' names that was on the I think the cult, or it was one of the other, neither the cult or the winery. I think it was a cult. The same doctor's name that was already kicked out of medical industry for prescribing OxyContin to people who don't need it. That doctor was associated with the cult and the fucking deli that's in between the cult and the winery. So now it's like, is that like a drop-off station or something? Or are we going to do like deals in there and then people separate cars? And like, is that really like a legit deli? Is it just there to look as a deli and money laundering meetup spots? Like like, and I was like, what the fuck was the odds of that? What was the odds of me even clicking on it and checking?
Yeah, seriously.
But I was just like, I was like, this seems way too convenient. And I was like, there's really no business on this road, too, except for this one deli. Let me check this out. And I was like, what the fuck?
That's
Yeah.
a great idea, because I've gotten map pictures. But like this one, when they go to New York, they're like, oh, we're around the corner from the United Nations. And I'm like, that's not suspicious. And then I look it up, and they are literally within walking distance of the UN. So, but that's a really good idea. I'm going to do that, because I got to track that money, man.
I've noticed other, with the Fellowship of Friends and somebody else, also things with equestrian parks. Very
Yeah, because
close.
they have horses.
Which makes me wonder, again, with like stuff with horses, and you mentioned horses before. When I covered on the Long Island stuff with the Nazis, there was a Long Island camp out in Yaphank, and right next to it is an equestrian thing. Again, fucking horses. Just really weird.
Yeah, it
Horses
is.
are big with rich people. They're just crazy hobbies with them, with the horses. I mean, Yeah.
And the Manson, the family, like they were dancing around in, horse manure and doing weird stuff in horse manure while they were working at Spawn Ranch. I mean, Ed Sanders had some really solid information, and specifically with all the animal stuff here, I definitely think that all of it is relevant. And now, specifically, you guys are talking about the horses, so I'm going to have to go back through that part of his book and, really dig in, because that's what they were doing there. And that is absolutely right, Jay Snyder. Yeah, that's why I talk about friends, familiars, right? The animals, yeah. Uh, it's all just extremely
Just fun
suspicious.
fact: the horse estrus cycle is very similar to that of the human female. So, just I don't know if that's
Oh,
anything that
that's very
might lead to
helpful. Thank
something.
you.
So, yeah, there you go.
That is very interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, because there's a few animal watchdogs out on Twitter, and they've seen some of the stuff that I've been posting. And I want to arm them to the teeth with information, because I know that they will get the attention of Miss Remini, because they can read through the lines without having to be conspiracy theorist or whatever people want to call it. They know that that's the process, and they see that there's something wrong, and she won't answer them. So that's very helpful, because they'll know more about that than me. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, of course.
Leah Remini. That shit cracks me up. Even when she come out, I even thought that was just like kind of weird. I'm like, you're showing how horrible these people are and how much they go after people, but nothing's happening to you. Like
Yeah.
even though I was enjoying the series and watched the whole thing, that was always still a thought in my head. I'm like, well, why has nothing happened to you and this other guy with the beard on
What a
that you got?
better tactic than to pick your nemesis. Groom and
Oh
pick your
wow,
nemesis. Yeah.
this is literally the most amazing first conversation that I've had with any two people, that you guys get it. Seriously, and I don't have to sit
It's
here
just-
and
It's
explain
true
it.
though.
You guys
Yeah.
get it. Thank you. I appreciate that so much, because seriously, like a
and I
lot
was
of the
like I said, I was a fan of the show, and I still thought that. It was just like very weird, you know.
it's a lot of the intelligence ties that I was able to make was because of, some people know who they are, but they are two elderly whistleblowers from the Church of Scientology. But these people have, black intelligence ops run on them. And I mean, these people think like Danny Casolaro, Gary Webb, and I would say more so Gary Webb level, because just one blog post of Hubbard's intelligence ties is 400 pages long. It's literally a book. They're so thorough. Um, but all them people on that show, they know who they are. They won't help them. So there's something weird going on,
That's
right?
exactly right.
There's
Yeah.
free zone Scientology, there's the independent Scientology,
Right.
there's the L. Ron Hubbard Scientologist, lots of weird stuff.
Well, I
So
like
thank
how
you
you.
guys for seeing through it.
Yeah, I liked how you kind of also talked about some of these true crimes and then these trials, how they are related to Scientology, how they are related to all these other, you know, branches off of them. That I had no idea about. I That blew my mind.
Yeah, like the stuff with OJ, it's so
Yes, that's
weird. And then you've
specifically
got
the one
like
I was
Ira
talking about.
Reiner.
Yes,
Ira
yes.
Reiner ties into Iran Contra, man. And like Ira Reiner was literally the DA for McMartin. So it's like Satanic Panic, which ties into the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which, the ex Scientology community loves those spook doctors, right? And then you've got OJ. Like, it's like, okay, do we have to sit here and reevaluate everything because nobody's considered, that Scientology is dangerous, except for what they trot out on TV? Because, yeah, why hasn't anything happened to the people on TV, right? They would
Exactly.
know exactly where they're at because they're watching them on TV. So,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Do you wonder? Because I think, especially if there's a connection, which I do think that might be for sure. Process Church and Scientology. Do you think there is like legit like occultism or occult ties or MK Ultra style stuff behind it? Like both?
yeah, absolutely. Yep,
Uh,
absolutely. I mean, the process wasn't necessarily doing anything particularly unique. I think that I can only say that, now in this day and age and being looking back. But when you look, and I haven't gotten to that part yet, but I've read everything. So Hubbard's really old publications and the process, they're literally a mirror of each other, except for the process is like a dark mirror. So when he comes out with the concept of the bridge, the total bridge to total freedom, whatever, and the way that he lays it out as far as, chaos to freedom, it's the exact same thing that the process is putting out, like almost at the same time. They take the same sort of path. Something interesting that was pointed out to me by the whistleblowers, and I had never thought about it before, and I'm going to show people. So, the bridge is bottom to top, right? So this is chaos down here, and you're trying to go clear. But they told me it's supposed to be flipped on its side, right? So you're actually supposed to be going, to the east. So you're leaving here, and you're supposed to be going, eastward towards, that's where your freedom is. That's where going clear is. So I think as far as sort of occultism, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. As far as MK, I mean, I don't really think that anyone can particularly argue against it because, there's still stuff that nobody has ever seen before, right? And I mean, out of Timothy Wiley's mouth, I know that he's hanging out with John C. Lilly. And, isn't it kind of weird that, L. Ron Hubbard, the hospital that he was pretending to be a doctor at, which is literally what was going on in MK Ultra, that hospital specifically ended up merging with the Presidio, where Michael Aquino ended up working at later on. These people are just in weird places at weird times, and they're allowed to do weird things with, no punishment whatsoever. So I believe that Hubbard was probably playing doctor and God knows what he was doing. And then, Jolly comes on the scene right around the same time. Uh, they sort of both emerge very similarly, and Jolly kind of goes through the fast track as far as from college through his doctorate training, right? And then his longest tenure is at Tavistock. He's at Tavistock for 10 years. That's the longest thing on that man's resume. And why is he the first one that's coming out speaking out against Scientology, right? It's like, okay, they're just warring both sides against the middle. That's how I see it.
Kind of an offshoot of MK and a little bit of Nazi occult is the case with Henry Murray. He was the scientist at Harvard, and he pretty much pioneered MK Ultra when he did the experiment on those 22 boys, one of them being Ted Kaczynski. So yeah, I mean, I think that and the tie-in is that before he did the stuff with Ted Kaczynski, he left to do a biography on Hitler and came back, and they, I think, assigned him as lieutenant colonel, check me if I'm wrong, of the OSS, which later turns into, I guess, the CIA, right? If I'm correct.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Henry Murray, but yes, the OSS was the predecessor. So,
Yeah.
and everybody I think knows, that yes, Ted Kaczynski was absolutely an MK Ultra victim, 100%. And I'm going to look into that because I really do want to go back and kind of map out everybody that, could have been tied in with Hubbard, because what other cults might that tie into? Because specifically with the processes theology, as far as the four deities, there were a lot of like Jesus cults, right? Like sort of like hippie Jesus cults, and they could totally cloak themselves in that, especially in Haight Ashbury, because I'm
Jesus.
hoping that I will come across that tie.
I even think like the whole the whole clearing process. I often think that that's like kind of like MK Ultras in itself. It's like, or it's going to end up becoming that because you're just telling them your darkest secrets, if you're being honest, and they're going to
That's it
use
right
that
there.
against
I mean,
you.
that's
You
what
know what
they
I'm
will say.
saying? Like, it's going to end up turning into, you're going to get MK Ultras somehow, unless you're really
Very blackmail-y.
stories. But so, I do see a connection. I think if it wasn't like an actual like program, I do think that there was at least MK Ultra influences within that stuff.
So I will tell people if you are interested, because I'm not there yet. I have to come back to it, but it just came to my mind because you mentioned the OSS. There's a book that I need to read, and this is one of these specific intelligence ties, but there is an intelligence tie as far as MK with Scientology before Hubbard comes out, and he's told, was it William Burroughs? No, it was John Starr Cook, because Hubbard was tied to John Starr Cook. John Starr Cook was the one who told him to make it a religion. So I'm going to be reading a book called The OSS and I, which is from one of these individuals who gives a very long, drawn out history, but that just completely slipped my mind. Yeah, he's got a few intelligence ties. So I'm going to kind of try to simplify that for people, because it is an MK operation. It's just they got that tax-free status. That way they could rake in money, and then eventually it turns into a grift. But I mean, yeah, you're literally like sitting there getting harassed by somebody. Like, you're going to be punished for your thoughts, right? Like, you're a bad person because you had bad thoughts, and stare at the wall for however many hours, and then stare at that person for however many hours. That's not weird at all. And tell me all your weird kinks that you've literally never even done, and I'm going to make you feel terrible about it. It's just, tell me that that's not major MK vibes, right?
Oh, I thought that was religion for a second. I'm sorry.
The confession.
It's all, yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, I fucked myself up now. I don't know. It was something you were saying about MK Ultra. I already forgot now because I said that. But there was another question I wanted to ask, and this might take it a little bit out there. But the only reason I'm asking is because I have seen it be kind of a commonality within weird cults. Like, all right, I'll take the Urantia book. There is connections to the Kellogg's family. Kellogg's were eugenicists. Nazis, in my opinion, are eugenicists. You start getting into, a lot of times when you see that happen, you will see a lot of animals involved as well. Do you think there might be something like that behind this as well with the process?
Oh, hell yeah, there is.
Okay,
Yes,
all right. No,
yeah.
I just thought maybe that might sound out there to you or other people. But it's, to me, the reason why I'm asking is because I think I have seen it actually a lot when you start researching certain stuff.
Yeah, that's why I included in like my process opening where it's Hitler with his pet Alsatians, the video clips, because these people had Alsatians and he loved Alsatians, and he was absolutely a sort of animal activist. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. However, it's the Nazi symbolism, the eugenics of it all, because I think gene therapy and life science, let's just call it what it is, right? It's eugenics when we get down to it at the end of the day. And they did have ties, people that they name. I can't think of the guy's name, but he started, I think it was the American Nazi movement specifically. I mean, there's a couple Nazis that they name in this book that they were traveling around and hanging out with. So as far as all of that goes, I mean, yeah, that's how I see a lot of the sort of animal advocacy within occultism, and then the customized or personal medicine, because the stuff that they have to do to get there is very dark.
Yeah, I don't know. I just was wondering. It was something that actually popped up in my head while we were even talking this last hour. Is because I've seen that a lot lately with cults and animals.
And I was gonna
Yeah.
that reminded me what you just said, that I wonder how much of it is because how like the Mormons are keeping record of everything genealogy wise and whatever, but this could be a way to submit, some sort, like, here's my umbilical cord, freeze it, or here's this, and they can run it through and keep a genetic file on everyone submitting their samples. And so if they didn't get it through other means, they can now get it this way. I don't know why that occurred to me,
Absolutely.
but that was something that kind of stuck out.
Absolutely. I think that you're 100% right. One of the first sort of projects I was working on before all of this, came into my lap, I guess. Uh, there's that weird satanic ritual abuse case in Utah that kind of dates back to around the time that the process arrived in Utah. But that guy's family specifically, I traced them back, and they have it is their DNA heritage. It is like a nonprofit, and they are the family that founded Utah as a Mormon state. So he's upper echelon within the LDS church, but that's what they do. They literally are just storing samples of everybody's DNA throughout the years. And my most sort of out there, I guess, conspiracy theory, which, makes sense to me because, for a while I was like, well, maybe they're trying to achieve immortality, right? Like that's what they're looking for, is like a way to be immortal. Because I'm thinking of it more from like the megalomaniac sort of cult leader status, right? I straight up like, I don't care how crazy it sounds. I'll never be able to prove it, but I think that these people are trying to trace a bloodline specifically. I think that that's what they want.
I've thought
Yeah.
that too. I have thought that
Yeah,
too.
no, I've thought that. I've
Yeah.
thought that,
They're
or
looking for something. That's what
Yep.
I've always said. Because when we do stuff and you tag and you sample and you quantify, you're looking for something. If
Yep.
not looking for something, you're banking it like a seed bank. Like in the event that it all goes shit, you still need, and only a few survive, you're going to need hybrid vigor in order to promote the species. And if you have all of this bank and all of this data, you can now create hybrid vigor without the actual people. You just have the, what's it called, the blueprint to do it. But I've thought of the whole, they're searching, they're mining the data for for something, but bloodline related. Yes, I 100% agree with you on that one.
Glad I'm not the only one. Thank you. Because once you start talking about like the black nobility and like the Great White Brotherhood, people get really weird when you're like, hey, these people might just be changing their last names, every couple of decades. And technically they go back to all these other bloodlines. But yeah, I have a feeling that, these folks flew under the radar for a really long time. So that's why I'm trying to figure it out, before whoever flips the switch off.
Whenever you look at all historical texts or any kind of references to anything, the emphasis is on bloodline. You look at royalty, you look at all of these families, everything is about bloodline. Why wouldn't it be? Hell, Star Wars was about bloodline, So, yeah.
Absolutely, because when I was looking up to Grimston, obviously I'm looking through this massive archive and there's so many, but you can just see like the catalog over hundreds of years of just this person birthed this person and here's here. And I'm just like, okay, great. Why? I mean, I know why, but it's still suspicious.
do you think any of this stuff goes back to, I always thought it was interesting, not that what he did already wasn't bad enough for people to be talking about, but I was a little surprised when Epstein had gotten busted and they went on about like this shit that he was even doing with trying to like basically eugenicist himself. That
Oh
just kind
yeah.
of like thrown to the side. Nobody ever really, I mean, I
Yeah.
understand all the other things that, that he got in trouble for or whatever was horrible enough that I could see how that took up everybody's, attention. But the other stuff I thought it's really interesting if you think about it.
He was courting some of the top leading scientists in stem cell research, in eugenics, in genetic research, all of like embryology, fetal development. I mean, he was courting all those scientists, and even so much that he had an appointment at one of the universities to where he would lecture. But I think it was a way to kind of rub elbows with these people.
Right.
As
Yeah,
well as
absolutely.
his megalomaniac
And
attitude. But
when he was in the Bahamas, and I can't remember the name of the company off the top of my head, but in those court records specifically, he was trying to set up basically like the Khan Academy, so sort of like an online program, online homeschooling. He was I say targeting because I do believe, wealthy people targeting poor people in, the Bahamas. Kids on the spectrum specifically, because maybe they are more gifted at math or computer technology. Basically, he wanted to do a sort of Neuralink and have these kids program and then run this AI on the island, because apparently, according to these court records, the Bahamas has the most unimpenetrable internet in the entire world. And that's why he was there. So my conspiracy is that someone within the tech community or Silicon Valley, that they're the ones that took him out, because that was very serious technology. Especially, but like I said, like doing like a brain chip with disproportionately disadvantaged because of where they're at. And he comes in and, presenting things like, hey, your kid's going to get a free lunch if you guys just sign up for this digital thing. And, this is all going to be great. Like, I'm sorry. That's,
There was people
yeah.
in New York taking jabs for frickin' a free hamburger.
Oh, dude, I'm an ICU nurse. Don't get me started on that stuff, please. I just, when I hear, like, I see the ads now, or if I see someone out in public, or if I'm in a store and they're like, please stay 6 feet apart. And I'm like, no, not doing this again. Sorry. No, not playing this game. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Going back to the whole keeping records and looking for bloodlines and all that, horse people or horse breeders keep the most extensive records of who sired who damned who came from what, all of that. That is like some of the most extensive breeding records are in the horse industry, equine industry. So it's interesting. It just kind of all back ties in. So
absolutely. Yeah, because I'm going to look and see on the map now, because they own so much property. There has to be some serious equestrian breeders out there. That's a solid lead. I appreciate it. That'll take it into another angle, because I know it's not just one thing. It's not just predictive biotech. I know that. It's going to be something super obscure that I've never heard of, or that is kind of hard to find, but that's a solid lead.
That's really interesting. There's something up with these horses, for sure. I mean, you do see them all over the tarot deck too. So who knows?
Yeah.
Could be just occult symbolism in certain ways as well. But is there anything else? We're already almost at an hour and a half. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or cover, or you just want to leave it there, and maybe we could always just have you back on and continue again later in the future?
I would love to come back. This was such a fun conversation. Like, you guys are great. Good energy. And no, because I will literally sit here and bounce around. You guys see my research. I take people with me so they understand that I'm literally just jumping all over the place. But no, I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, when I was watching your stuff, I was like, it kind of reminded me, from when I was doing the same thing back in the day with the Occult Rejects, when I would cover certain secret societies or cults and stuff. It just reminded me of the same way, its style. Like, I take people through everything, the court,
It's fun.
the business. Yeah, I love it. I love it. So when I saw your stuff, I was like, oh, I definitely got to get her on. This is going to be great. And I had a good time. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Me too. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Let everybody know again where they could find your stuff.
So Rottingjewels at Instagram and YouTube, and then Dana Duda on Twitter.
Awesome. And I think, did you have a link tree?
I do. It is in my profile on my YouTube.
Okay, yes. I think then that is what I included in the bottom. I think I have your link tree.
Perfect.
So everything in there. And Lisa, thank you again for jumping on. I always appreciate stuff that you have to add. Nothing for you to plug except that you're a co-host on the Occult Rejects, and the link for that is in the bottom as well. So this was a great show. I really loved it. I'm finally glad we got you on. I know it took a while between both of us bouncing back and forth. And I think at that time I was really busy covering stuff, and you were going ham on this stuff on YouTube. So I'm just assuming we were both busy, but we finally made it happen, and I couldn't be happy. So,
me too.
And we'll definitely do more of this again. Everybody who jumped in on the live, that is what's up. And I'm going to say it again, as I always do. If you catch the live or you're rewatching, the old live, check out the chat. It's always got amazing stuff in there. Again, it's almost like a whole other show in itself. And I love it. And that's why I go live. And I can't thank you people for doing that. So thank you. What's up to the listeners and the fans. And that is the end of another NY Patriot show. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.